Today on Locked On Canadiens, so many things happened in that Boston Bruins game. We're going to try to wrap our heads around it and see who stood out.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1159 of Locked On Canadiens. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined by the wonderful Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. And Ian, there were so many things that happened in this game. It was 15 minutes in, and I was already exhausted. How did you find the game?
Well, for those who might not know, I am an American. I live in the Northeast. I unfortunately live in the Bruins market, which means on a night like tonight, I have no choice but to watch the Boston Bruins feed of the game. So I watched a very different game than the one everybody else did. The way that the Bruins broadcast just analyzes the game is a disservice to those fans. I have no other way of saying it. You can be a homer and want your team to win and all of that stuff. I've got no problem with that. But they were actively watching replays of things that were happening in front of us and saying something else was happening. It was one of the most absurd games I've ever watched on that network. So if you ever have a chance to watch NESN, I think you should try it just as a, hey, see how the other side lives. And that's what this was. You will not want to do it again. That's how I'm opening this episode. That's what I'm taking away from this game first and foremost.
So what I'm taking away from this game is that obviously it's the second game of the season. We can't really draw, a full season experience out of this. There were some standout performances that I do want to get into, but there are some things that I found a little bit worrying. The Canadiens were not able to play with a lead, whereas like the previous night, they played an entire 60 minutes, almost an entire 60 minutes with the lead, right? Yeah. Very early goal. And they weren't able to hold on to the lead. Not only that they squandered it, they tie the game and then like immediately allow Boston right back in. So, and from an entertaining and exciting perspective, this game had it all. It had so many things, and it didn't even have to have any shenanigans. Obviously, there were some scrums. We like that. We like people getting between the Bruins and our goalie. Like we love that. But from my perspective, like it felt like there was so much content. And I still can't draw an opinion as to how each player is going to perform this season from that game.
Yeah, I think what I'm taking away from their play in this game is a lot of what I took away from in the previous game, in that the defense is not doing the Canadiens any favors. They are getting hemmed in their zone way too much. They are not making quick, accurate decisions when trying to break out the puck. There's one guy who's doing it particularly well. He just played in his fourth game. That's not good. Like Kaden Primo, you look at the stat sheet at the end of the game, he's a +3 with 2 assists. But when he was in his own zone, it was hard to watch. Like they're getting hemmed in. Every forecheck is just the end of the shift for them. If one guy presses in on the forecheck, it becomes a penalty kill. It's unbelievable how effective forechecking is against this hockey team. And that's not something that I thought we saw a lot of last year. So that's a recent development that I'm not a big fan of. They need to learn how to make those quick outlet passes so that they can give their forwards a chance. The Canadiens scored 4 goals in this game. That's not like the forwards were doing it. They were trying, but they never got any opportunities to go the other way because they were constantly trying to get the puck from below their own goal line. So the outlet needs to get better and the rest of the game will improve. But not a ton of shining stars in this one, so to speak. There's a few standout performances, but generally pretty stinky across the board.
Yeah, and the thing is, it is the second night of a back-to-back with travel. And
Yep.
given that, actually, I was much more impressed with the Canadians. Like if you
Yeah.
contextualize it in that way, I thought they really tried really hard. I feel like they're confused. Like you were talking about the forecheck being really effective. Last year with this defense, I felt that they were, most nights they were trying to like feel it out and just trying to like develop an instinct for the game and or for what they're supposed to be like team defense. And I did not see that in the last two games, right? I feel like they don't have the answer. And they're not even playing desperate. They're just kind of allowing it to happen, right?
It's
Like
very casual. It
ex-
looks very casual. They think they have way more time with the puck than they do. And that
exactly.
in the NHL, like that's the biggest hurdle for guys to overcome is the amount of time and space that you have to make plays. It's almost like they've forgotten, how quick they need to start moving. That's why Lane Hutson has been so effective, is because he needs far less time and space than a lot of these other players in order to be effective. I thought he was excellent against Boston, as much as he could be, spending most of the night in his own zone.
Right. And I thought also it was really cute that there were a bunch of people from the Boston Terriers that showed up at the game to watch him.
Yeah.
I love that. And he seems to be thriving, right? Like I guess for all intents and purposes, that's like the latest city he played in. So
Yeah.
it does make sense. It's sort of a hometown team for him. And I honestly I thought that he looked so much more mature than a guy who, as you pointed out, this was his fourth NHL right like game.
Yeah.
And so I just found, he continued to impress. And I'm sorry that you had the Nesson broadcast because I was flipping back and forth between TSN and RDS. And they were talking about like this guy, could score 40 points this year. And I don't think that I don't think they're crazy. I don't think that's a hot take in any way. I feel like, Lane Hutson right now, the only problem I have is that I hope that the rest of the defense doesn't drag him down because he
Yeah.
does need to be freed up to do a lot of that point scoring. He does need to have a little bit of space. Like I feel like if you give him an inch, he'll be able to take a mile. But the fact is, like, I don't want him being stifled by the rest of the defensemen.
Yeah, and I thought, you know, the third period started and the lines were in the blender. And we saw a lot of Hutson and Gooley, and I thought that was a lot better for both of those players. We have a question in the mailbag about that, so I kind of want to hold off on it. But I just think that the sky is the limit for this kid. I mean, we're back to point per game lane, by the way. He, he didn't get a point in the first game. He had two in the two games last season. He has two tonight. 4 games, 4 points. Point per game lane is alive and well. That's mostly what I was tracking tonight. As soon as he got the first assist, I was like, "Hey, we might get back on track here," and that is
They need
exactly
us
what
working
happened.
on.
So we're gonna keep riding that wave.
I'm
Every
just so
every point he
excited.
picks up is a victory of it in itself.
I'm so excited for this kid. We were talking about this and we love it. I do want to talk a little bit about Matheson and Savard and what's going on there a little bit. But I also wanted to really quickly talk about Justin Barron.
Uh,
So I felt like there were so many periods of time in the game where he played well, and then he would make like a damning fatal mistake. And I
yeah,
just felt so bad because I saw him trying to put it together.
yeah. It's sort of a lot of what we've talked about with Kaden Primo, and that the range of potential outcomes for Justin Barron is particularly wide. That's not great, especially for a defenseman and a goalie. We'll get to Primo, I think, in our second segment. But, Barron is one of those guys that we've talked about as just running out of time. And if Logan Mailloux gets off to a really hot start in Laval, the calls for him to come up are going to become louder. And it's only a matter of time before he's sitting and Logan Mailloux's playing. So it is imperative for him to get off to a good start. Remember, he's not good at good starts. He doesn't do them. Last year, he got off to a terrible start. He was unplayable the first couple of games. So this isn't new, which is what makes it all the more concerning, is that we've seen this movie before. And I don't like how it ends.
We definitely know how it ends. We know how this game ended. But in this podcast episode, we're going to get into Kaden Primo, but also there were some positives. There were quite a few positives other than Lane Hutson, which is surprising, but also encouraging. And we're going to get into that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with quality candidates faster. One of the things I love the most about Indeed is that it just takes all of the difficulty and the frustration out of hiring. It brings you quality matches and it gives you, you get that personal connection with real quality candidates. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, so let's get Kaden Primo out of the way so we can talk about some fun and good stuff, right? Tough night for Kaden Primo. I don't think he played badly. I just think that when your defense is that porous, you need to be a little bit better. You need to be the one to provide the confidence. You need to be the one who knows what to do. And again, like the Bruins spent most of the night in his face.
Yeah. Yep. And I don't think the Canadiens gave him a good start. Right? He was under fire from the first shift of the game. The puck went in behind the Canadiens net and they lost a forechecking battle, and all of a sudden the game essentially just tilted towards the Bruins, and Kaden Primo had to be, on guard the entire game. The last goal, the Castellet goal, I still don't know how it went in. I'm still so confused. I was watching it like, did it hit Barron and go in? Did Primo just not, like, what happened?
It did. It hit Barron and went in.
It's
It
a
hit
weird
Barron,
goal. Yeah.
and then it hit Primo on the way. Kaden Primo on the way.
Yeah. Well, at first, what they were calling him on the Boston feed was Primo all night. That was really fun. But I don't know that I necessarily blame Primo for that last one. It's a
No.
fluky goal. Like, it's just unfortunate that it happened. It's unfortunate that Matheson and Barron got walked on the way in 17 seconds after they just scored a goal and got within one. The game, that's what's so frustrating to me is how winnable this was. It was right there. In the year of 2024, we had a 2-goal game from Brendan Gallagher and somehow lost. That shouldn't happen. If Brendan Gallagher is scoring 2 goals, both of them very nice goals for what it's worth.
Yes.
The first one, a shot pass from Armia, who I also thought was good. The second one, he was just in front of the net. Jake Evans found him and Zadorov didn't have his stick. But that's what makes all of this the more frustrating is Primo didn't have his best night and they were still in that game. Gallagher had 2 goals and we still found a way to lose. Like, there's just so many components of it that are really frustrating at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree because this game was winnable. Particularly, like I think the fact that it was winnable for me was such an encouraging sign because I thought
Yeah.
they would be looking like they were skating in mud the whole time. They didn't give up until the last moment. I feel like, we talked about the defense, like it was weak. The defense as a whole, not particular players, right? Last night, when I say last night, I mean with the Leafs game, I understood the Savard and Hutson pairing a lot better. Tonight, there were some issues, and I think it's probably back to back. Savard is an aging veteran, all of that kind of stuff. I don't want to knock him too much. Like has been since the moment he arrived in Montreal, he's been given an assignment that's beyond his actual ability, and he's really tried as much as he can to live up to the task. Mike Matheson was really frustrating to me because I thought he was playing well, but he still sucked. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like,
yes, it's it's overall, he plays so much that we just have more opportunities for good and bad.
Yeah.
If I see him at the point just take a wrist shot off of the shin pads of the guy 3 feet in front of him one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind. It happened at least twice in this game, and it almost ended with a goal against. Because the guy's blocking the shot. Now he just has a breakaway.
Yeah.
Matheson plays too much. He plays too much hockey. And I like Mike Matheson. I think a lot of the hate that's directed towards him is misplaced. Here's the other thing. We're all calling for Hutson to be on power play 1. Maybe Matheson and Hutson can be on power play 1. Maybe you take Kirby Dach off of there, who I don't think has played poorly, but he doesn't seem to have a role. He just kind of is there. Put Lane
It's
Hutson
like
and Mike
he's a
Matheson on
good
the same
forward,
power play.
right?
Yeah.
He's a good forward. They're putting him there they're putting him on there because he's a talented forward. They can
Yeah.
put him on the second one.
Yeah, and that would make the second one even more potent, and it's already been good.
Yeah.
I think Eric Engels said that Montreal got 4 goals out of their second unit all year last year, and they already have one
Yeah.
with the first Gallagher goal. So, man, I don't know how they fix Mike Matheson playing too much, but they have to figure it out. It's not sustainable. It was hardly sustainable last year. He's just prone to gaffes when he's playing that much. It's unfortunate because he's such a smooth skater. He has such a great offensive mind. I get why Marty St. Louis wants him in all of these situations.
He's smart.
I think again, all of the hate towards him is mostly misplaced. It's frustration with an event and you're blaming it on a person.
Yeah.
But, they have to find a way for him to play less, and they have to find a way to get Hutson on that power play. Like I said, I don't hate the idea of keeping both of them there because Hutson plays like a forward most of the time anyway. So
Exactly.
just play them both there. I don't know. But yeah, it was frustrating to see the lines go in the blender and the power play just stay the same. That was kind of annoying.
And I feel bad because I said he sucked because I mean he does play too much, but that was the thing, right? Like
Yes.
every year there's one guy, and it's usually the number one defenseman on this team that gets played way too many minutes and then makes mistakes, and then their amazing play for like 98% of their game
Yeah.
like gets overshadowed by like the 2% of the mistakes that they make.
Right.
So I think,
Usually the good outweighs the bad for him. Tonight that didn't happen because it just that's not how the chips fell. So, I don't have an issue saying that he sucked tonight because a lot of the mistakes he made were not, outweighed by him doing good things.
Yeah.
So it's a numbers game at that point.
And
So
it's not fair to him. Like they need to be more fair to him. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing. All right, really quickly, because we are running out of time, I want to talk about a bunch of good stuff. Brendan Gallagher with 2 goals, playing like a young man again for the last couple of games. Really, really excited about that. Cole Caulfield, honestly, like all the naysayers and the doubters, I think he's going to do it this year. I think, we're going to shut a lot of people up this year. I really hope that he doesn't get injured, knocking on wood, because I can't deal with that again. Loved Armia's game.
Yep.
He played really well. Kapanen, not a lot of time.
First NHL
point.
Yep.
Solid start, like solid first, official regular season NHL game, like that.
Can I say something gross?
Go
Josh
ahead.
Anderson.
I know I was gonna say,
Like I didn't realize
killer.
He's a good penalty killer. I don't know where this came from, but it makes sense because he likes to come in on the rush. If you attach him to the top of the umbrella and he's just there with his stick, he's gonna knock a couple away and get breakaways. But of the things that we've criticized about Marty so far, that's a really good play putting him on that penalty kill. I really have enjoyed it.
It's so good. And the thing is, like, I saw like on twice tonight, I was looking and I was like, who's that being aggressive on the penalty kill? Because we were talking about that last night and how much we loved it. And then it was Josh Anderson. I was like, why is Josh Anderson the best penalty killer on this team?
And now you are 1 goal closer to having to eat the wings of death. So
I know, right?
Yeah, 19 more.
Was it 20 or 25? I can't remember. But
it's going to be 30 by the end of this segment, so you can avoid it.
So anyway, so those of you who don't know, one of our listeners challenged me to do the Hot Ones challenge. If Josh Anderson, why do I keep calling him Josh Anderson? If he scores, I think it was 20 or 25, I can't remember. We're gonna have to pin that somewhere. But no, I thought he did a really good job. Didn't love Dvorak, but like I really, really, really loved Josh Anderson, like the creativity with which they're managing Josh Anderson, and the fact that like he seems to be enjoying it, which is good. And I think the Canadiens are solid with their number one goaltender. They need to work on their like number two goaltender. And I think that if all of these little things get figured out, like you were talking about, suggesting putting Lane Hutson and Mike Matheson on the PP, reducing the number of minutes Mike Matheson plays, give Gooley more. You know what I mean? Switch out Justin Barron for Logan Mailloux. You have somebody who's got the endurance to like, you know, to play longer, so you can reduce Mike Matheson's. I keep calling it hours, like
yeah, his shifts.
His
Yeah.
shifts. All right, so it is Friday. We do have to move on to the mailbag, but I think this was like a positive. Like overall, it's disappointing that the Canadiens didn't win, but like my verdict on this game is that it was overall a positive. Second night of back-to-back, they made the game look winnable. There are a lot of things that we can be optimistic about. There's a lot of things that they can fix, and they should.
Big picture.
That's my conclusion. Right. And we'll be back with our mailbag in just one moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You hear us talk about FanDuel a lot, and it's because it's America's number one sportsbook. And honestly, like if you're an NFL fan, it's the start of the season and you can win big with a big return on FanDuel. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You heard me right. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. All right, it's mailbag time, and we have a lot of mailbag questions. We're going to try to get to as many of them in this segment as we possibly can, and then if we can't, we'll see if we can do a makeup segment at some point in the next week's episodes. All right, Ian, do you have the mailbag questions? I have some prepared.
I'm ready to go. Let's start with Robert Rice. With the future of the Canadiens defense seems to be set around the future core trio of Gooley, Hutson, and Reinbacher, do you believe that this is sufficient to give the Canadiens what they need to contend? I have a suspicion we view Matheson will leave in 2026 due to it being his last big contract opportunity. Or will this be a matter of needing someone from the group of Xhekaj, Struble, Barron, Mailloux, Engstrom, Konyushkov to make big steps to rival the ceilings of that trio? What do you think? Is that core three enough, or are they going to keep tinkering and adding?
I don't think that core three is enough. I think they're good. I don't think they're enough. But the question, like I like the second part of the question, taking steps, right? So we mentioned Engstrom, Logan Mailloux. There were a couple of other guys, Struble. And here's my question: how large of a stride do you think each of those players is going to be able to take? Like, is their ceiling actually high? Because if they do have a high ceiling, and we do think they're in a position to hit it, I think that the answer can come from within. But I still think they need more. They need that one guy, that one magical guy that everyone is seeking, Cale Makar type, somebody like that.
Yeah. I think the right side is still of need. Reinbacher and Mailloux, we don't know what Mailloux is going to be. We don't know what Reinbacher is going to be, unfortunately, given the injury that he sustained and likely a lost season. They're going to keep adding. They're going to keep using, high draft capital on those guys. They're going to use their draft capital to acquire those guys. So, no, I don't think they're done. I think that, the future on defense is in good shape, but they're by no means done, because if they were done, we wouldn't be talking about the game that they just had against Boston, right? That wouldn't have been a thing. We wouldn't be talking about how the defense gets hemmed in their own zone for too long.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, that's sort of where I'm at with the defense. All right,
Sorry, go on.
ready to move on? All right. This is from SpongeBob Lose Pants on Twitter. Hope it doesn't happen, but would an injury to Matheson be the only circumstance where Lane gets power play one time?
No.
I don't think so either. I think there will be a breaking point here where, look, the power play, as much as we're giving it, a bunch of crap, it's got 2 goals in 2 games. We can't Marty doesn't like to tinker with a winning lineup. That power play is scoring. It
Yeah.
is. Just objectively, it's working. At least, enough. But I do think that there will be a breaking point eventually, and they're just going to have to move on.
And Marty is being asked about it. Like, he is being asked, why aren't you putting Lane Hutson on the first PP? And the answer that he's given is you can't just, throw him into the fire right away. And you know how Marty is. I feel like if he has it up his sleeve, he's going to ease him into it.
Yep. Yep. Amelia Pond asks, you can give effective truth serum to any coach, player, GM, player safety, etc. What do you ask them? The catch, you can only tell your co-host the answer and no one else. There will be no real world consequences, as in, yes, Carey getting dragged out of the crease. That would be a fun one to ask the war room in Toronto. What comes to mind for you first?
Oh my God. I would ask Zdeno Chara if he did it on purpose.
That's a great one. That's a really, really great question to ask, because I would love to know the answer. It was like when Montreal played Boston in the playoffs and Andrew Ference definitely didn't give the middle finger to the crowd. And then,
It was a girl's malfunction.
growing up in Connecticut as a Canadiens fan in Bruins territory, I had to hear, oh, it was an accident. He didn't mean to do it. And then years later, he comes out and says, yeah, I totally did that on purpose. So like that was really irritating for me. I felt vindicated 10 years after the fact, which is never helpful. Let's move on to Kay, who we need to congratulate on getting one of the gigs over at Game Over Montreal. Very excited to see that play out. So Kay, congratulations. We'll be tuning in. We'll have to have you on here eventually. Kay asks, do you think Savard is the right D partner for Hutson, or would you have gone with Matheson? Kind of touched on this a little bit, but what do you think?
I don't know. I like them playing with Gooley, but I do think that Matheson would bring out more in his game. Would help him a lot more in terms of his offensive creativity, because we talked about earlier in this episode, he needs that time, he needs that space. And Savard, for all intents and purposes, is extremely stay at home. But I don't know. I liked him with Gooley.
Yeah, I think, we have the benefit of watching that game. I think the question came in before the game. I really liked Hutson with Gooley. I think that they complement each other in the same way that Savard and Hutson complemented each other. And then that gives you a pairing of Savard and Matheson, which we've seen in the past, and it's been good. And it gives you a firmly NHL veteran pair, right? The Canadiens don't have one of those. They don't have a, has played hundreds of games pair other than those guys. So that's the only potential one they could put together, because the rest is Xhekaj and Barron and Struble, all guys who were part of the rotation for years. I do think that the Canadiens lineup on defense will only be optimal once Jaden Struble is in the lineup. Ultimately, he was so good in training camp, and I want to see more of him. It sucks that he got hurt as soon as the season started. That's usually Mike Matheson's thing. I remember there was 2 training camps in a row where he got hurt, but yeah, I think that we haven't seen the optimal form of this Canadiens defense pairings yet, and we'll give it a few more games before we start to shuffle guys around, I think.
We're running out of time, but I did want to get to one from our friend Boondoggle. He wanted to talk about enforcers. And this was after, I think it was before the Leafs game as well, that he asked the question, and it was about, should the Canadiens invest in an enforcer?
I wouldn't. And that's not to say that I don't value them, but you shouldn't spend money on them, and you shouldn't spend draft picks on them, because they're very one-dimensional, and that dimension does not, statistically add much to your team. It's an emotional add. I mean, I just think back to when they signed Brandon Prust to 4 years, $4 million a year. Why do that? Why do that? There's no reason in 2024 to be doing that.
Well, the spirit behind his question was to kind of free up Arber Xhekaj, because I didn't mention him actually, but he made a lot of good plays tonight. There were a lot of situations where he bailed out, somebody else on the team making a mistake, right? Yeah. So I do agree with the idea of taking the pressure off of Arber Xhekaj, but I think it's Arber Xhekaj that can do that by not pursuing, by allowing them to come to you, as Ian would say, and sort of drawing the penalty instead of instigating.
Yep. Agreed. All right, you want to hit our trivia and then get out of here?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Last episode's question was name the player. Montreal, Boston, Dallas, Montreal, New Jersey. Laura, I believe you got it right at the buzzer. And also Scott texted us and we did get a bunch of answers in the comments. So who's that player?
Everybody got it right. I actually guessed a different player. I'm not going to mention it in case that guy comes up. But eventually, my second guess was Michael Ryder, he who dented the Stanley Cup as a member of the Boston Bruins. And he was one of my favorite Montreal Canadiens at the time. Who do we have?
I loved Michael Ryder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the reason we have Gallagher wearing 11. He started with 73, and they traded for Ryder, and he had to switch numbers.
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll get to today's question. Name the player. We're sticking with the Montreal-Boston theme. Montreal, New York Rangers, St. Louis, Toronto, Boston, Edmonton. That is Montreal, New York Rangers, St. Louis, Toronto, Boston, Edmonton. I think this one's tough. So good luck. If you get it, put it in the comments. Send us an email. Let us know how smart you are. We really appreciate it.
In the meantime, thank you all so much for listening. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. So please listen, please watch. We're on YouTube as well. Tell your friends, subscribe, all of that. You'll find us on Twitter, LO_Canadiens. You'll find us on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. You'll find our email address at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Send your mailbag questions to any of those media. You can find me on Twitter at The Active Stick. You'll find Ian at Maybe It's Ian. We want to thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all on Monday.